Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about unnecessary job roles. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, which job roles do you think are unnecessary or overpaid in the companies where you have worked? I would say this is going to be a little bit tricky to answer without any bias or anything like that. I can only give you my experiences, and I want you to to sort of take what I say now, guys, with a pinch of salt, because I. Full disclosure, one of the first things I usually tell people is that I don't really see much of a need on an average team for, say, a scrum master. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there are no situations where a Scrum Master is not necessary. And the reason why I say this is because I want to make really, really sure, guys, that everything is contextual. The thing that I usually see when things are like when you have an unnecessary role is when a person gets hired to do a job where more or less there's no need for that specific situation to have that role. And it's more business politics or management type of deal where they get that job, and so it's more a question of that they've been hired to do something just because some other people needed their role, but for this specific situation they're sort of, well, they're not needed really. And so I've seen teams, guys, where I've actually worked with scrum masters who got so bored that they quit because they literally only had 1 or 2 meetings, like 5 minutes, like they did stand up. That was it. But in other teams, guys, I've had scrum masters who are, they're managing, they're involved in a whole different way, and they have tons of work and so forth and so forth. And believe it or not, sometimes, guys, I've never thought I would see it, but I did. I've seen Scrum Masters be so critical because the software developers are, for some reason, so incapable of managing a backlog, like a simple backlog in cards and things like that, that you literally needed an individual to do that. And for me, that is insane, but I have seen it. But on average, one of the first things that I would say is, on average, unnecessary is to have a Scrum Master, because fundamentally what you need when you deliver software is a work framework or a process for delivering software in accordance with whatever you're doing. And for I usually go as far as to say that for a small team or like an average team, unless you have like multiple teams that need to coordinate and things like that, usually a simple Kanban flow is more than enough. You don't have to do like full Scrum or Safe or anything like that. It doesn't really, in my opinion, make sense. It's a little bit more than is necessary. But that, and in many cases, the rituals that you need to know in order to do Scrum. I mean, guys, I've been in teams where a junior software developer did it, or I did it. Like you basically picked. You like in my little example there with the guy who's quit as a Scrum Master. When he quit, literally nothing changed to our workflow. We just took over. We just share the responsibilities of doing the stand-ups and making sure that cards were up to date in the Kanban board and things like that, because that is, in that situation, he was really not necessary. And I think he sort of understood that. And then other roles that I would say are unnecessary are QAs when it comes to automation and things like that. So basically, the thing that I think is a little bit sad that we're doing today is that, so my argument is that a QA or a tester is a person that is very important or has a lot of value if your system has need of some form of manual testing or things like that. I don't think it's a good idea, which is what I see in many cases, where a you actually have a negative effect in many cases when you introduce a QA or a tester, because what happens is that the developers start thinking that the testing is happening with the QAs and so forth, so they themselves don't consider writing good unit tests or like an integration test and stuff like that. And what then happens is that you take people who have subpar, usually, software development skills, because the QAs, I've never seen a QA, like one or two, like who are really good at software development, but their focus is not writing code. So what they end up doing is to implement a bunch of automated end-to-end tests or UI tests and stuff like that in software that could have been written by real professionals, and they're not real professionals. And so it's the same time, I argue, like you're basically, the efficiency and the quality of the software being delivered is the highest in the hands of the software developers. And since they're already writing the unit tests and things like that, I don't really see a good reason as to why would you offload that part, like the end-to-end test, over to a QA. You might as well have the software developers write that too, and they're probably going to be able to optimize it and think about, code structure and all this sort of stuff, as opposed to what usually happens when you do the thing that isn't common for some companies, and that is that you get a bunch of really weird setups. I've seen many QA struggle to they have some really strange scripts or VM solutions or things like that, or because fundamentally they're not software developers, and usually they lack the necessary skills to set up a really stable end-to-end testing process and things like that. And to me, as I said, it's not necessary. I would even say in many cases it has a detrimental effect on the overall quality of the testing. And what I would say though is that the times I find QAs to be extremely useful is when they can do the thing that I argue that the QAs and testers should be most about, and that is to represent the users during the development process, so that, for example, if a new feature gets shipped, test it out, see how it feels. Is something there? Is it lacking? They should have a pretty good understanding of the system. And if there are other systems, a classic one is that you might have multiple platforms that work within the same sort of feature requirements. It's really difficult to automate end to end all of the various things that might happen in your system and then in another system and stuff like that. Those sorts of situations, it's really great to have a QA. And if, let's say, you have accessibility needs or things like that where automation is pretty tricky to achieve, then I think that they have a value. But for the average team, I would avoid having a QA, because I find it much more efficient to have software developers take charge of that process as well, because if they don't, usually what happens is that the overall code quality actually goes down due to the fact that they get a little bit complacent and they sort of start throwing things over the wall. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of QAs can testify that when they work with software development teams, that there's a lot of things that they get to take over a lot of responsibilities for the testing and quality of the entire system, and they usually get a lot more work just because they are there. And that's something that I do these days. I try to make sure that the software developers know that shift left type of mentality and taking responsibility for the testing process. Just because you have a tester or QA, that doesn't absolve you from your part of that responsibility. They have a role to fill, but because you are not doing the things that you are supposed to be doing, you put more pressure on them, which I don't think is a good idea. And then I have I don't know if you guys ever heard this. I have another role, which is a DPO, or something. Or TPO, or can't remember what exactly it was. It was a one specific company. I've never heard the term before. I don't even know exactly what it means, but it literally is just an individual who is supposed to, oversee that a project complies with the company standards and things like that. I guess to this day I don't understand really what their purpose was, apart from, of course, knowing the essence of what the job was to, and I'm not joking now, guys, maybe there are worse situations than mine, but I've never seen anything like it. In order to get my company, the one that I worked for at the time, to give my team access to one Azure subscription so we could just initiate some resources so we could start working on a project, the process of preparing all of the architecture diagrams and budget estimates and all the documentation and compliance and stuff like that, that whole process took 5 months. So 5 months to set up, to just get access, not build anything, just to prove that we could build something. The whole system we built, the proof of concept, took 2 weeks, but the process of getting approved was 5 months. During that process, the work of the DPO was to quote unquote guide us through that process. But this individual needed to know how to answer any of the questions in the system and anything like that. They were, for all intents and purposes, practically useless through the whole process. And here's the crazy thing. This is a permanent, full-time job. where once the process was over, they joined our stand-ups. And to this day, over all the time I worked there, they did not say even 2 words or had a single job or responsibility or anything like that within the team. I have never seen something as pointless as that, because I even said so to my manager. Like, maybe guiding us through the process of getting approved was a useful thing, like where they might have had some value, even though, I mean, I knew how to do this as well, because I, did the crazy thing of reading the documentation and connect with the people who do all the approves. So there you go, I figured it out. Maybe I could be a DPO. But once that was done, they had no value whatsoever to the team or anything like that. And this is what I tell my coworkers at the very least, or my software developers, when they ask about this. And I say, guys, those security folders that, or like rules for like evacuation and various company corporate training and all that stuff that you kind of go, this is obvious, it's kind of weird. In many cases, the reason why that is there is because the company has just some requirement on them to have it there. Like, this is not practical or anything like that. It's just circumstances that make this individual have that job, and it's completely coincidental if it has any value. It's just something that they, in some cases, a company has to do for legal purposes, so that if you sue them, they can defend themselves. And that's the whole reason that person is there. And I suspect that that DPO was there for exactly the same reason. It's just the company has decided somewhere, I'm guessing at the top, that we need a person to do this. And we were going to just standardize on always having that person, regardless if it makes sense or not. It's literally the same thing if you were to hire someone like a random person who sometimes might help you out with something, but when they're not doing that, you're just going to have them pay them to just sit around and wait for something to do. That is the experience I had, at the very least. So what I want you to take away from this is that, yes, there are many unnecessary and overpaid, or whatever you want to call it, roles, I would say, in IT. The most common ones I find are, like, you have testers or QAs for systems where the developers could easily have done this, or you have scrum masters or agile coaches for teams, or again, who are like, they have no real need for it. Or a classic one that I've had just the other day is you have a team of 3 people who, for some reason, got assigned to the wrong DevOps engineer, who put them on a full Kubernetes clusters, 35 microservices, and Istio mutual TLS setup, where maybe that person knows how to run all of that and everybody else has no fucking clue how to do that. And their system has, like, I don't know, 50 users or something like that. That's also great, because now basically that DevOps engineer has secured their position in that company, and Lord help the poor development team if that person quits, because learning Istio and Kubernetes and like all of that stuff, and then having all the pipelines and everything around it, that's going to be a treat to learn in a very short amount of time if someone quits. And then, of course, DPOs. As I said, I've only been in one company who had it. I have still no clue whatsoever what they did there. But then again, my manager didn't really understand either. But apparently he had talked to the chief honcho and sort of pushed back on the need for this role. And I quote, the CEO said, "We're going to have this role, and if you don't like it, I suggest that you quit." That was the whole motivation behind it. So guys, sometimes you're going to find that some people have a job for no other reason than that someone somewhere said that this is something we need. It doesn't make any sense, but someone very important decided that this is necessary. So here we are. Have a great day.